It starts with a voice crackling over the radio that shouldn't have been there. I'd been driving for 8 straight hours somewhere along Route 39, a stretch of highway most people only use when they're desperate to shave time off a cross-state trip. That night, the world was nothing but the narrow beams of my headlights, the black ribbon of cracked asphalt, and the endless cornfields pressing against both sides of the car. My phone had lost signal miles ago, and the only station on the radio faded in and out with bursts of static, like a distant conversation I was never meant to overhear. Just my luck that my car's GPS had comped out too, leaving me to follow old-fashioned printed directions, which were now creased and barely legible under the dashboard's dim glow. It was nearly midnight. I remember glancing at the digital clock, red numbers flickering uncertainly as if they were just as tired as I was. I told myself I'd stop at the first gas station I saw, but that was half an hour ago, and I hadn't seen so much as a driveway since sunset. It was one of those nights where everything outside the windows felt heavier, as if the darkness itself was leaning in, studying me. That's when the radio voice cut through. Not in English. Not any language I recognized, really. Just a dry, urgent whisper, buried under layers of static, like someone speaking straight into my ear, but from very far away. I fumbled with the knob, thinking maybe I drifted onto a weather alert or a trucker's channel, but the voice didn't change. For a moment, I caught a word, or thought I did. It sounded almost like my name. I nearly laughed, trying to shake off the chill that ran up my arms. Of course it wasn't my name. I hadn't slept in almost a day. My brain was probably just filling in gaps. Still, I turned the radio off, plunging the car into a new kind of silence that felt even thicker. I focused on the road, counting off the faded lane dividers like a mantra. 1, 2, 3, 4. I could almost forget the radio if not for the feeling that I'd just missed something important. About 10 minutes later, I spotted something up ahead, a flicker of light, low and yellow, cutting through the darkness. Relief washed over me. I thought maybe it was a house, or with any luck, an all-night station. My gas gauge was dipping close to empty, and I didn't relish the thought of being stranded out here with nothing but stalks and shadows for company. As I got closer, I saw it was a rest stop. Just a single tired building with peeling paint, and a couple of vending machines out front, lit by a buzzing fluorescent tube. The parking lot was empty, except for an old pickup truck, its windows so fogged with grime that I couldn't see inside. I pulled in, engine idling for a second longer than necessary before I forced myself to turn it off. Just a quick stretch, I told myself. Maybe a snack. Then back on the road. The moment I stepped out, the air felt different, damp, almost metallic, with the faintest trace of something sweet and rotten underneath. The kind of smell that makes the back of your neck prickle. The cornfields loomed closer than I'd realized, pressing right up against the edge of the lot, rustling even though there was no breeze. I headed for the restroom, glancing over my shoulder at the truck. No movement. In the reflection of the vending machine's glass, something flickered behind me, a quick, darting shape in the field, gone before I could turn. My pulse stuttered. Probably just a raccoon. Maybe a deer. But I found myself hurrying inside, shutting the door and flipping the lock with a flick of my thumb that echoed louder than I expected in the tiled, echoey silence. The overhead light hummed, throwing a harsh white pool that seemed to slide off the cracked mirrors and yellowed sink. I tried the faucet, but all I got was a coughing spurt and a rusted drip, leaving a rusty stain crawling out from the drain. Even the air inside seemed stale, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years, heavy with the ghosts of 1,000 weary travelers. I splashed some of the lukewarm water on my face anyway, watching droplets slip down my reflection's cheek. The mirror was warped, bending my face at the edges. I looked tired, sure, but something else. My eyes seemed a little too wide, my mouth a little too thin. I forced out a shaky laugh, the sound bouncing back at me. "Get it together," I muttered, gripping the edge of the sink until my knuckles blanched. It was just a rest stop, just a late drive. All the same, I found myself listening for sounds outside, half expecting to hear the crunch of footsteps on gravel. But there was only the hum of the light and the distant, irregular tick of the vending machine's compressor outside. I dried my hands on my jeans and stepped back outside. The air felt colder now, biting through my jacket. The parking lot looked emptier than before, if that was possible. The pickup truck hadn't moved, but now the windshield reflected the rest stop's light in a way that made it look like two wide staring eyes. I checked my watch, though I had no memory of putting it on that morning. The hands spun lazily, not tracking time at all. A sharp clatter made me jump, like dropping inside the vending machine. For a split second I thought someone was there, but the lot was still deserted. The can just sat in the tray, glinting. I reached for it, though I didn't remember making a selection. The label was faded, something generic I didn't recognize. When I picked it up, it was warm to the touch, as if it had been sitting in the sun, though it was the middle of the night. I turned to head back to my car, suddenly desperate to be moving again. The cornfield seemed closer than before, crowding in at the edges of the pale security light. The stalks were taller than me, shifting as though something was weaving through them, just out of sight. I told myself not to look, but my gaze kept darting to the edge of the lot. Every so often, a clump of stalks would sway, then stand perfectly still, as if they'd been caught in the act. As I fumbled for my keys, the radio inside my car flickered to life again, even though I'd switched it off. The same sibilant voice hissed from the speakers, louder this time, the static almost swallowing up the words. This time, though, there was a different rhythm to it, a cadence that matched the thudding of my heart. Then, unmistakably, the voice said something that sounded like, "Behind you." I spun so fast I nearly dropped my keys. Nothing but the empty lot, the dirty pickup, the endless wall of corn. The light above the building buzzed and dimmed, casting long, trembling shadows. My breathing sounded too loud in my ears. I tried to laugh it off, rationalizing that maybe some local prankster had hacked the radio frequency. Maybe it was a weird coincidence. But the adrenaline wouldn't leave my arms. I forced myself to open my car door, intending to slam it shut and speed off into the night, direction be damned. But before I could get in, I noticed something that made the hair on my arms stand up. On the passenger side window, smeared in condensation, was a single handprint. Not the kind you'd expect, no clear palm, no fingers spread from a quick touch. This was long and narrow, stretching almost the full height of the window, as if someone had pressed their hand down slowly, dragging it from top to bottom. The streaks were oddly symmetrical, almost deliberate, and for one wild moment, I thought it looked more like the imprint of a branch than a human hand. But I knew I hadn't left it there. I hadn't let anyone into the car since I'd started my drive. My mouth went dry. I wiped at the glass with my sleeve, but the outline didn't fade. It only seemed to sink deeper into the glass, like a stain behind the surface. I stood there, shivering, unsure whether to get in or run. A noise came from the cornfields, a low, breathy sound, somewhere between a sigh and a whisper. I turned, scanning the edge of the lot. The stalks were swaying now in a slow, deliberate rhythm, bowing away from the light as if pushed from within. Again, the chill at the base of my neck returned, stronger this time, crawling up into my scalp. My brain clawed for logical explanations. Wind, maybe, or an animal. But the air was dead still, and the movement seemed purposeful. I yanked open the driver's door and slid into the seat, fighting the urge to look in the rearview mirror. The radio was still spewing its garbled message, but now the words bled into each other, repeating a phrase that sounded more and more like my name each time. I stabbed at the power button, but the whole dashboard had frozen. Lights on the console flickered weakly, and the screen showed only scrambled lines, like an old TV with no signal. I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine hesitated, coughing once, then again. The headlights flickered on, illuminating the cornfields ahead in two narrow cones. That's when I saw a shape break the line of stalks. A figure, tall and thin, impossible to see clearly, its edges blurred as if it were more shadow than flesh. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, stepping into the far end of the lot. I couldn't breathe. I locked the doors, my hands clumsy and numb. The figure paused by the old pickup truck. For a fraction of a second, the truck's headlights flashed, though there was no one inside. The figure turned toward me. I couldn't see a face, but I felt its gaze. A pressure, heavy as a hand between my shoulder blades. My mind screamed to look away, but my eyes wouldn't tear free. Suddenly, every light in the lot went out. The car, the rest stop, everything plunged into pitch black. I could hear nothing but the frantic thump of my heart and the thin, ragged noise of my own breath. My fingers scrabbled for my phone, but when I pressed the power button, the screen stayed dark. I tapped it again and again, desperate, but the only light came from the radio, its numbers glowing sickly red, though the rest of the dashboard was dead. The voice crackled back on, impossibly loud. This time, it wasn't speaking in words I could recognize. It was laughing. Soft, hollow, and wrong. The laughter echoed in the cramped space of the car, bouncing around the cabin, until I couldn't tell if it was coming from the speakers or from somewhere behind me. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the back seat. A shape, hunched and angular, slowly unfolding itself from the shadows. I couldn't move. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they hurt, but the rest of me felt pinned, as if the car itself were holding me in place. The figure leaned forward, and,